Picture a widow standing in the doorway of a small stone house, staring at one last handful of flour in a jar and a few drops of oil in a small jug, certain that this was the very last meal she would ever prepare for her son. There was no pension waiting for her. There was no fund, no fixed income, nothing arriving reliably on the first of the month no matter what happened, no safety net of any kind beneath her or her son. And yet within days, that same jar of flour and that same jug of oil began providing for her household morning after morning, day after day, without ever running dry, for as long as the need lasted. That is not a story about a miracle that happened once and vanished. That is a picture of daily income, provision renewed every single day rather than a single lump sum meant to last forever. If you have been taught to fear the day your retirement runs dry, this video is going to show you 8 ways a woman today can build the same kind of daily provision that widow discovered in her own kitchen. One small, faithful action repeated day after day. Maybe someone convinced you that once your working years end, your earning years have to end right along with them, that whatever you saved, whatever check arrives each month, is simply all there will ever be from here forward. Let me tell you plainly, Scripture never once teaches that provision has an expiration date tied to your age. It teaches that God provides new mercies every single morning, and it teaches that a woman's hands, faithfully used, can keep bringing in daily provision for as long as she is willing to use them. Retirement, as the modern world defines it, a hard stop where income simply ceases, is not a biblical concept at all. What is biblical is rest from striving, paired with continued, faithful, daily stewardship of whatever gifts remain in your hands. Even the priests in the Old Testament, once they reached a certain age, were released only from the heaviest physical labor of the tabernacle, while still remaining active in guiding and assisting the younger priests around them. Their usefulness did not end. It simply changed shape, becoming steadier, wiser, and quieter than before. You are not finished. You are simply entering a new season of the same faithful work. Think about how strange it would sound to say that a woman's usefulness to her own family, to her own community, quietly expires on a specific date simply because a certain number appears next to her age. Nothing in Scripture supports that idea, and nothing in your own life has to accept it either. The same hands that raised children, ran a household, showed up faithfully for decades of work. Those hands are not suddenly empty, simply because one particular chapter of employment has closed. A new chapter, one written in your own daily rhythm rather than someone else's schedule, is entirely available to you starting today. Let me tell you about that widow a little more fully, because her story is worth sitting with. Her husband had died and left her in debt, so much debt that a creditor was threatening to take her 2 sons away as payment, a horror almost impossible to imagine as a mother. She had nothing in her house but a single small jar of oil, nothing else of any value at all. A prophet told her to do something that must have sounded strange, to gather empty jars, as many as she could borrow from her neighbors, and to start pouring from her one small jar of oil into every single empty vessel she could find. She did not argue that it was foolish. She simply obeyed, jar after jar, and the oil kept flowing, kept multiplying, kept filling every container she brought to it, stopping only once every single jar was full. She sold that oil, paid off the debt that threatened her sons, and lived comfortably on what remained for the rest of her days, never once needing to ask anyone for charity again. Her name was never even recorded for us in that account, only her need and her obedience. And yet her story has fed the faith of desperate, worried people for nearly 3,000 years, read aloud in more languages than anyone could ever count. She did not receive a single massive payment that solved everything forever. She received daily provision, multiplied through faithful, repeated action, exactly the kind of income we are about to walk through together today. Notice, too, what she did not do. She did not wait for the debt collector to relent out of pity. She did not sit paralyzed by how impossible her situation looked. She simply obeyed the small instruction in front of her, poured what she had into the first empty jar, and let the provision multiply one vessel at a time, exactly as much as she was faithful to keep pouring. Before we continue, subscribe to this channel and tell me in the comments which of these 8 daily income ideas feels most like something your own hands could actually start this month. And let another woman reading the comments know she is not the only one starting over at this stage of life. Stay until the very end, because I will tell you which one of these 8 tends to grow the most steadily over time, turning small daily action into something that quietly outpaces every fear you ever had about running out. I will also share the one habit every single woman in today's video had in common before she ever earned her first dollar, a habit you can start practicing this very afternoon, long before you decide which of these 8 paths is truly yours. 1. Sourcing and reselling small goods with steady daily consistency. The base verse is Proverbs chapter 31, verse 14. She is like the merchant ships. She brings her food from afar. Notice the picture here. Ships that sail out and return again and again. Not a single voyage, but a steady, repeated rhythm of trade. The Hebrew word for merchant here is sechar, meaning one who trades, who profits through repeated, deliberate transactions rather than a single lucky sale. In today's world, this becomes sourcing small items, close-out goods, seasonal decor, or bulk household items, and reselling them steadily online or at a small local market day after day, one small sale building into a real daily rhythm. The author Napoleon Hill wrote decades ago that a definite, repeated daily action, more than any single burst of effort, is what actually compounds into real wealth over time. But the Bible said it first, describing a woman whose provision came like ships returning again and again, not once and done. Consider Joyce, a retired postal clerk in Charlotte, North Carolina, at 60 years old, who began sourcing discounted seasonal items after the holidays and reselling them steadily online throughout the year. Within 1 year, Joyce had built a rhythm of selling something small nearly every single day, bringing in close to $800 a month from a habit that took her barely 30 minutes each morning. The fatal mistake here is dealing dishonestly, inflating prices, or misrepresenting an item's condition to make a quicker sale. Proverbs chapter 11 verse 1 warns that a false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. What should you do now? First, choose one category of item you understand well. Second, commit to one small listing or sale every single day, not sporadically. Third, describe every item honestly, even when it costs you a sale. Ask God to bless the steady, daily rhythm of trade already forming in your hands. It is worth noticing that Joyce never set out to build a business at all. She was simply trying to make a little back on holiday leftovers so they would not sit unused in her closet. The daily habit came first, almost by accident, and the income followed only once she had already proven to herself that she could show up, small and steady, day after day, without fail. Have you ever built a small, steady habit that quietly added up to more than you expected? Tell me below. 2. Preparing and delivering daily lunches for workers who have no time to cook. The base verse is Exodus chapter 16, verse 4. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day." Notice the rhythm commanded here, not a stockpile for a month, but a portion gathered fresh, daily, trusting provision to arrive again tomorrow exactly as it had today. The Hebrew word for day here is yom, simply meaning a single day, emphasizing that this provision was never meant to be hoarded, only received and used faithfully in its proper time. In today's world, this becomes preparing a simple, consistent daily lunch menu, packed and delivered to construction crews, office workers, or small shops nearby who have no time to cook for themselves. The author Ken Blanchard has taught for decades that consistent, reliable daily service, delivered exactly as promised, builds trust faster than almost anything else in business. But the Bible said it first, teaching daily gathering, daily faithfulness, as the very rhythm of provision itself. Consider Rose, a retired cafeteria cook in Nashville, Tennessee, at 63 years old, who began packing 10 extra lunches each morning and selling them to a nearby construction crew her nephew worked with. Within 6 months, Rose had 31 standing daily orders across 3 job sites, earning close to $1,100 a month from a routine she had already practiced for 30 years in a school kitchen. The fatal mistake here is promising delivery and then becoming unreliable once the routine feels familiar. Proverbs chapter 20 verse 6 warns that many proclaim their own steadfast love, but a faithful woman who can actually be found is rare indeed. What should you do now? First, choose one simple, repeatable daily menu. Second, offer it to a small, specific group of workers nearby. Third, deliver at the exact promised time every single day without fail. Ask God to bless the daily bread you prepare with your own hands for others. What Rose discovered, almost to her own surprise, was that none of her customers were choosing her lunches because they were fancy. They chose her because when she said the food would be there at 11:30, it was there at 11:30 every single day, whether it rained or the week had been hard. Reliability, more than talent, became her entire reputation. Have you ever built trust with someone simply by showing up exactly when you said you would day after day? Tell me below. 3. Running a small daily stand selling fresh eggs, produce, or garden flowers. The base verse is Psalm chapter 145, verse 15. The eyes of all look to you, and you give them their food in due season. Notice the phrase due season, a specific, appointed time when provision is given, not stored up all at once, but released in its proper daily and seasonal rhythm. The Hebrew word for due season here is et, meaning a set, appropriate time, the right moment for a specific provision to arrive. In today's world, this becomes gathering fresh eggs each morning, cutting garden flowers, or harvesting produce, and selling it fresh at a small daily or near-daily roadside stand or porch table. The author James Clear has written extensively about how small, repeated daily actions, not occasional large efforts, are what actually compound into lasting results over months and years. But the Bible said it first, describing daily provision released in its proper season, gathered fresh rather than stockpiled and forgotten. Consider Marilyn, a longtime farmhand's wife in Columbus, Ohio, at 58 years old, whose small flock of hens had always produced more eggs than her own family could use. She began setting a small, honesty-based stand at the end of her driveway. Within 4 months, Marilyn had steady daily customers stopping by nearly every morning, earning close to $350 a month simply from surplus she had been giving away for years without a second thought. The fatal mistake here is assuming a small daily stand will simply run itself forever without any attention or planning. James, chapter 4, verses 13 through 15. Warn against boasting about tomorrow as though it is guaranteed, reminding us instead to say, "If the Lord wills, we will do this or that." What should you do now? First, count what you already produce in daily surplus. Second, set up the smallest possible stand or table to offer it. Third, check on it faithfully every single day rather than assuming it needs nothing from you. Ask God to bless the due season already unfolding in your own garden or yard. Marilyn admits she almost talked herself out of the idea more than once, certain no one would stop for a handful of eggs from an unmarked table at the end of a gravel driveway. She was wrong. People will always stop for something fresh, something real, something gathered that same morning by an actual hand rather than shipped from somewhere far away. Have you ever had more from your own home than you knew what to do with until someone else needed it? Tell me below. 4. Offering daily pet sitting and dog walking visits for neighbors who work long hours. The base verse is Proverbs chapter 27, verse 23. Know well the condition of your flocks and give attention to your herds. Notice this is not a passing glance, but real, careful, daily attention to the needs of living creatures entrusted to your care. The Hebrew word for know here is yada, meaning to know intimately, thoroughly, not a surface familiarity, but a deep, attentive understanding. In today's world, this becomes walking a neighbor's dog each afternoon, checking in on a cat while its owner travels, or offering daily visits to elderly pets who need consistent, gentle care. The dog trainer and behaviorist Cesar Millan has spent decades teaching that animals thrive most under calm, consistent, attentive daily care, exactly the quality a patient woman with time and love to give brings naturally to this work. But the Bible said it first, commanding careful, attentive daily knowledge of the creatures placed under our care. Consider Francis, a retired veterinary assistant in Tucson, Arizona, at 61 years old, who began walking a neighbor's aging dog each afternoon simply as a favor during a busy work season. Within 5 months, 4 more households nearby had asked for the same daily visits, and Francis was earning close to $600 a month doing work she had always loved but never once thought to charge for. The fatal mistake here is treating another family's beloved animal carelessly simply because the work feels informal or low stakes. Proverbs chapter 12, verse 10 reminds us that the righteous woman knows the needs of her animal, but the mercy of the wicked is cruel. What should you do now? First, offer 1 trial visit to a neighbor's pet this week. Second, learn that specific animal's routine and needs thoroughly before charging anything. Third, treat every daily visit with the same care you would want for your own pet. Ask God to bless the gentle attentiveness already living in your hands. Francis says the real secret to this work was never about loving animals. Plenty of people love animals. It was about paying close enough attention to notice the small things, a limp that appeared overnight, a bowl left untouched, the kind of quiet attentiveness that turns a simple walk into real, trustworthy care. Have you ever cared for an animal so faithfully that its owner trusted you completely? Tell me below. 5. Making daily companionship calls to isolated elderly neighbors paid by their families. The base verse is Proverbs chapter 31, verse 26. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. Notice both halves of this verse, wisdom and kindness together, a voice used daily not to gossip or complain, but to genuinely bless whoever hears it. The Hebrew word for kindness here is chesed, a rich word meaning loyal, faithful, covenant love, far deeper than simple politeness. In today's world, this becomes a short daily phone call to an elderly person living alone, checking on their well-being, listening patiently, and offering the kind of steady voice that reassures a worried adult child living far away. The author Dale Carnegie taught, decades before modern psychology caught up to him, that genuinely listening to another person is one of the rarest and most valuable gifts anyone can offer. But the Bible said it first, describing a woman whose daily words were themselves a form of faithful kindness. Consider Evelyn, a retired switchboard operator in Tampa, Florida, at 65 years old, whose gift for patient conversation had gone unused since her retirement years earlier. She began calling one lonely widower in her church each morning simply to check on him. Within 7 months, 3 families living out of state had hired her to make the same kind of daily calls to their own aging parents, earning close to $500 a month for conversations she would gladly have had for free. The fatal mistake here is breaking the trust of these private conversations by repeating what was shared in confidence. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 2 warns us not to be quick with our mouths, letting our words be few, guarding carefully what is spoken and what is kept. What should you do now? First, offer 1 free week of daily calls to build trust with one family. Second, guard every private detail shared with you completely. Third, let consistency, calling at the same time every single day, become your greatest reputation. Ask God to bless the wisdom and kindness already resting on your tongue. Evelyn will tell you that most days, the calls last less than 10 minutes, and very little of substance is actually discussed: the weather, a grandchild's visit, a favorite old television program. But she has come to believe that the 10 minutes matter less than the fact that someone, without fail, called. Have you ever had a conversation with someone lonely that clearly meant more to them than you realized at the time? Tell me below. 6. Growing and delivering fresh-cut flowers on a small daily or near-daily route. The base verse is Genesis chapter 8, verse 22. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night, shall not cease. Notice the promise of unbroken rhythm here. Day following day without interruption, a pattern built into creation itself that a wise woman can align her own work with rather than fight against. The Hebrew word for harvest here is katsir, meaning the cutting, the gathering of what has grown, a task that returns again and again in its proper rhythm. In today's world, this becomes growing a small cutting garden and delivering fresh bouquets on a short daily or near-daily route to a handful of regular customers, offices, or small shops. The pastor and Bible teacher Charles Stanley often said that God's faithfulness is renewed every single morning, and a small daily flower route is, in its own quiet way, a living picture of exactly that renewal. But the Bible said it first, promising that seed time and harvest would never cease as long as the earth remained. Consider Ruth, a retired florist's assistant in Kansas City, Missouri, at 59 years old, who planted a modest cutting garden in her backyard after her employer's shop closed for good. Within 8 months, Ruth had a standing route of 12 regular customers receiving fresh bouquets several times a week, earning close to $700 a month from flowers. She grew herself and cut fresh each morning. The fatal mistake here is neglecting the quiet, unseen daily tending that makes the visible harvest possible at all. Haggai, chapter 1, verse 6 warns that you have sown much and harvested little, a picture of effort spent without the deeper attention and priority it actually required. What should you do now? First, plant even a small bed of easy, reliable cut flowers. Second, tend it faithfully every single day, not only on delivery days. Third, offer your first bouquets to neighbors before ever expanding your route. Ask God to bless the unbroken rhythm of seed time and harvest already written into your own small garden. Ruth says the quiet hour she spends cutting stems each morning before the rest of the world is fully awake has become the most peaceful part of her entire day, income arriving almost as a byproduct of time she would have gladly spent in that garden anyway. Have you ever grown something with your own hands that brought real joy to someone else's day? Tell me below. 7. Offering a small, dependable daily or near-daily home cleaning route for a handful of regular clients. The base verse is Proverbs chapter 10, verse 4. A slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. Notice the direct, simple contrast here. Not talent, not luck, but diligence itself as the deciding factor in whether a household prospers or struggles. The Hebrew word for diligent here is charutz, meaning sharp, decisive, energetic in action, a hand that moves with real purpose rather than reluctance. In today's world, this becomes cleaning a small, manageable route of homes on a consistent schedule, offering the kind of dependable, trustworthy service that busy families and other older adults deeply value. The author and pastor Michael Hyatt has written often about protecting margin, keeping a schedule sustainable rather than overloaded, so that quality never suffers for the sake of quantity. But the Bible said it first, praising the diligent hand while warning plainly against the poverty that follows a slack one. Consider Carol, a retired hospital housekeeper in Raleigh, North Carolina, at 62 years old, who began cleaning for 2 elderly neighbors simply to help out after their own health declined. Within 9 months, word had spread quietly, and Carol had built a manageable route of 6 regular homes, earning close to $900 a month doing work she already knew how to do with real excellence after 30 years in hospital housekeeping. The fatal mistake here is taking on far more homes than can be served well, sacrificing quality and your own health for the sake of more income. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 6 reminds us that better is a handful of quietness than 2 hands full of toil and a striving after wind. What should you do now? First, offer your services to 2 trusted homes first. Second, keep your roots small enough to serve with real excellence. Third, protect 1 full day of rest each week without exception. Ask God to bless the diligent, decisive hands already at work in your own life. Carol turned down 2 additional homes last year, not because she needed less income, but because she had learned the hard way, years earlier in a different season of life, what happens to both the quality of her work and the peace of her own home when she refuses to say no to anything. Have you ever taken real pride in leaving a space cleaner and more peaceful than you found it? Tell me below. 8. Offering mobile hairstyling and simple beauty visits for homebound or elderly clients. The base verse is Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 18. You shall remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you power to get wealth. Notice that even the ability to earn, the very strength in your hands, is credited here to God's provision, not simply to personal effort alone. The Hebrew word for power here is coach, meaning strength, capacity, the actual physical and practical ability to accomplish a task, a gift given rather than self-generated. In today's world, this becomes traveling to homebound or elderly clients who can no longer easily visit a salon, offering simple haircuts, sets, or manicures in the comfort of their own homes, restoring a small piece of dignity along with every visit. The author Rachel Hollis has written about how the smallest acts of care for another person's dignity often matter more than any grand gesture, and a woman who helps an elderly client feel presentable again is offering exactly that kind of care. But the Bible said it first, reminding us that even the strength to earn a living is itself a gift from God, never something to take quiet credit for alone. Consider Sandra, a retired salon receptionist in Indianapolis, Indiana, at 57 years old, who had spent decades watching stylists work without ever styling a single client herself. After her own mother became homebound, Sandra began practicing simple sets and trims, first on her mother, then on 2 of her mother's friends. Within 10 months, Sandra had 11 regular homebound clients across her town, earning close to $800 a month, bringing dignity and care directly into the homes of women who could no longer leave them easily. The fatal mistake here is letting pride in the visible results of this work overshadow the deeper reason behind it. Proverbs chapter 31, verse 30 warns that charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. What should you do now? First, offer 1 free visit to a homebound neighbor or family member. Second, let dignity and care, not vanity, guide every single visit. Third, build your small roots slowly, client by client, rather than rushing to grow too fast. Ask God to remind you daily that the strength in your own 2 hands was always His gift to begin with. Sandra says the moment that convinced her this was worth continuing was not a payment at all. It was watching one of her mother's homebound friends catch her own reflection in a hand mirror after a simple trim and sit up a little straighter, a little prouder, for the rest of that afternoon. Have you ever helped someone feel like themselves again simply by caring for them with your own hands? Tell me below. Did something in today's message settle quietly into a place in your heart that needed exactly this? If it did, give this video a like and share it right now with a woman who needs to hear that her provision does not have to stop simply because a paycheck did. It is no accident her face came to mind while you were listening. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss what comes next, and before you go, say this out loud, right where you are sitting. My provision is renewed daily, just like it always has been, and my hands are not finished yet. Let us walk back through everything we uncovered together today. Sourcing and reselling steadily, built on the rhythm of ships that return again and again, rather than sailing only once. Daily lunches delivered faithfully, built on gathering a day's portion fresh, trusting tomorrow's provision to arrive exactly on time. A small daily produce or flower stand, built on provision released in its proper appointed season. Daily pet care, built on truly knowing the needs of what has been placed under your care. Daily companionship calls, built on wisdom and kindness, spoken faithfully day after day. A flower root grown and delivered fresh, built on the unbroken rhythm of seed time and harvest woven into creation itself. A small, dependable cleaning route, built on the diligent hand that quietly outpaces the slack one every single time. And mobile beauty care for the homebound, built on remembering that even the strength in your hands was always a gift, not something you built entirely alone. Every single one of these connects back to that widow with her one small jar of oil, who received provision not all at once, but daily, faithfully, exactly enough for each new day as she kept pouring what she already had into whatever was placed in front of her. None of these 8 paths required her to wait for a windfall, a lottery ticket, or a stranger's rescue. Each one simply asked her to keep showing up, day after day, with whatever small amount of oil was already sitting in her own hands. Here is your challenge for this week. Choose one of these 8 daily income ideas, the one that quietly grabbed your attention while I described it. Do not wait for the perfect moment to begin. Take one small, concrete step today, this week, the same way that widow simply started pouring from the one jar she already had, trusting that faithfulness in the small daily action was enough to begin with. Do not measure this first week by how much money arrives. Measure it only by whether you were faithful to take the one step you promised yourself you would take. The income follows faithfulness. It has never once worked the other way around. Before I close, let me pray this simply over you. May your hands never feel too old, too tired, or too finished for the work God still has for them. May you rise tomorrow morning, trusting that today's provision, however small it looked, was exactly enough, and that tomorrow's provision is already being prepared for you as well. May the fear of running out loosen its grip on your heart tonight, replaced instead by the quiet confidence of a woman who has learned to pour out what is already in her hands and trust the rest to God. The final word for you today comes from Lamentations, chapter 3, verses 22 and 23. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is his faithfulness. Your provision was never meant to run out all at once, and it never will, as long as you keep faithfully pouring out what is already in your hands. Whatever season you find yourself in tonight, whatever number sits next to your age, whatever fear has quietly followed you through this day, let it rest now. There is a small jar sitting somewhere in your own life, waiting to be poured out one more time. I will see you in the next video.